Thank you, and I'm going to keep my words of introduction brief. We want to get into a very lively panel discussion and debate with you guys. There is no right or wrong answer tonight. The whole concept of new emerging business models is something that we should be taking attention of, but we're not absolutely sure where it's going to end up. Now, when I was talking to Jim about selecting tonight's issue, the thing that we're going to deal with, I thought long and hard about dealing with disruptive new sustainability models. Surely we're trying to run before we walk. Surely we've got tens of thousands of companies out there right now who just need to do the Billy basics of CSR. Less energy, less water, less packaging, better standards in factories. All that still needs to be done by huge number of companies. But there are three reasons I decided to push on and challenge ourselves and stretch ourselves with new business models. Firstly, the clock is ticking. Whether it's the IPCC report or any other sensible measure of social environmental harm on the planet at the moment, we simply do not have enough stuff to go around. We're shifting very rapidly from a world of 1 billion middle-class consumers to a world of 3 billion. And rightly, people want everything that we take for granted here. There isn't enough stuff on the planet to provide for those needs. The second reason that I want to talk about this is about positivity. One of the reasons that thousands of companies are struggling to grind their way through the basics of CSR is it's not very inspiring. Less of this, less of that, a bit of sackcloth, it's a bit of risk management. It's all a bit down in the dumps. The language of tonight is positive. It's about growth, it's about opportunity, it's about new ways of creating value for your organisation, for society and the environment at the same time. So I want to see a different kind of language generally that inspires businesses to change. And that's the second key point. And the third thing is, this is happening. The train is pulling out of the station. As much as we sit here as largely sustainability professionals in this room, worrying about how we're going to make the world more sustainable, new business models are popping up all around the world. And they're not popping up because there's a grand design for sustainability out there. They're popping up because they're better for the consumer. The reason that Airbnb, that Zipcar have emerged and are doing so well is they deliver something consumers want, and, oh, by the way, they're more sustainable. So whether I like it or not as an incumbent in this space who has started the journey to be a better business and have many miles still to go, I need to already start thinking about what lies over the horizon, the new grand challenge, a radically different approach to business. So that's why we chose today's topic, why we said we'd provoke rather than just sort of wallow in why so many companies and governments are not acting today. Let's provoke ourselves to think bigger and bolder. Now, when we put this model out for consideration, we identified 7 new business models that are emerging. And they're just our take on it. You could all find, I'm sure, 7 other names or 10 other names to define what we're doing. We talked about radical transparency, access over ownership, peer-to-peer lending, about shortened supply chains, about inspiring consumers to change. All of these are ideas, options for new business models, how we've described them to get the debate going. And I just want to share the slides that Jim was referring to. He talked about these, the crowd, the wisdom of the crowd, what you're telling us. And by far what basically we're saying is the ones that have most appeal to the consumer, the purple collar at the top, access over ownership, peer-to-peer lending, example of Zopa that we're going to hear about a little later. Online retail, all these models are starting to appear that feel very good for the consumer. At the other extreme, we've got closed loop. It doesn't mean too much to the consumer. It's a little bit technical, but the crowd felt that this was the business model that would probably bring most environmental and social benefit. Now, the sweet spot that we must all find is a merging of the two. Good for the consumer, good for planet and people. But this was just your perspective on where you thought those 7 business models sat. We then asked you a provocative question, and one that humbled me. We asked which are the sectors that face disruption the most. As all these new technologies and business models emerge, which incumbents should be most frightened? Hey, the reason I'm standing here is me. Because if you start to look at how people consume goods in the future, why will they need me? Why will they need any retailer as a middleman? When everybody becomes a consumer, but everybody a producer, a source of materials and products that they can pass on, they can barter, they can swap, they can sell, they can exchange. Why do you need the guy that used to make the primary goods in the 20th century? So I'm very clear that I stand here not to give a lecture to anybody else about the need to change. I face as much challenge and change as anybody in this room in terms of incumbency and adapting our business model for the future. Now, of course, new business models are going to emerge, just as they did with the dot-com bubble, just as done with the internet revolution. new models emerge, but established companies learn to adapt. So as much as we've now got an Apple, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got Amazon, we still have Walmart and Tesco's and Carrefour, we still have Puma and Nike and Coke, all big brands that have learned to adapt to this new multi-channel world. And I think exactly the same will happen when it comes to sustainability. Huge new business models will emerge. People will get very rich on developing sustainable business models. But a number of us, the establishment, will try and adapt too. We've got no God-given right to succeed or get there, but we'll try. So these are the findings that you've shared with us as the crowd. We also asked you whether it was predominantly an opportunity for business or a threat and opportunity. Now everybody's come back with this balance. There's a bit of risk, there's a bit of opportunity in there. Of course there is. There's a blending of the two. But I very much believe about opportunity. The businesses, the established businesses that get out of the traps quickly now, start to adapt, will be the ones that prosper. The small entrepreneurs that start to build the business models now and have the courage to do it early will be the ones that become big in the future. So that's what we want to discuss today. We've got a great panel. We've got examples of small companies that are emerging in this space. We've got large companies emerging as well, or learning to adapt. We're going to have some discussion up here as a panel. I'm then going to come out to you as an audience to ask your questions, challenge away, and then we'll go into the usual round table model as well. So I don't want to say much more than that. Today is about you, getting something about it, provoking. I don't want you to walk out of here believing there is a right or wrong answer. I just want you to start to think differently, start to prepare your businesses for a very different future. And I also want you to share, whether it's here amongst the plenary session or at the table, everybody's got something they can add to this session. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our panel to come up and join us. I'll introduce them when they're sat down, or they'll introduce themselves, and we'll get moving from there.